The situation in Ukraine, the US peace deal with Iran, the two main topics dominating the talks today as G7 world leaders pressure, notably, Donald Trump to see things their way. The majority of leaders wanting Trump to put more pressure on Vladimir Putin, and the majority wanting to warn Trump that his Iran deal risks entrenching Tehran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs, whilst at the same time leaving the situation in Lebanon unresolved. Well, let's hear first of all from Volodymyr Zelensky speaking before he went into that meeting.
Before G7 started, to be honest, we gave message that we are ready to meet with Putin during G7 because Trump is there and Macron is there, Starmer and Merz. So Europeans plus America, this is a good, I think, very good opportunity to meet all together. And Russia demonstrated again that they are not ready to speak about peace. That's why we have to be ready to push and pressure Putin more and more until he will end this war.
Well, our international affairs editor Kethevane Gorjestani is joining me here on set. Kethevane, Volodymyr Zelensky there. He's sat down at that table with G7 leaders. What can we expect?
Well, look, it's more Zelensky, the Europeans, the other G7 leaders versus Trump rather than the G7 leaders and Zelensky. It seems that this is about, for the Europeans, about sort of being the entourage of Zelensky and trying to change Donald Trump's mind or to bring him back towards a focus on Ukraine. The goal of most of the G7 leaders, especially the Europeans, of course, is to make Donald Trump understand that America needs to continue supporting Ukraine, that they need to increase pressure on Russia. What does that mean? Well, support for Ukraine, that largely means military support for Ukraine, and pressure on Russia, that means adding sanctions, not lightening the sanctions like we've seen the Americans do recently. And Zelensky and the Europeans are sort of aligned also on the fact that they want to make it clear that they are willing, the Europeans, to participate. And Zelensky and the Europeans believe that it is important and crucial for the Europeans to be at the negotiating table as the Americans are when it comes to talking with the Russians, this idea of maybe restarting those talks with the Russians. And as a sign of goodwill, as we heard in that soundbite, the Ukrainian president sort of announcing that he had offered to meet the Russian president at the G7 and that it was the Russian president who didn't answer that call to speak. It also points to another strategy of the Europeans and the Ukrainian president, which is to show that it is indeed the Russians that are blocking progress on the front of the war in Ukraine, not the Ukrainian president. And that is because they want to try to change Donald Trump's mind, who has so far been willing to excuse and explain away all of the positions of the Russian president, but has not been so tolerant of Volodymyr Zelensky. And that's what they're really trying to do here.
Yeah, it's fascinating while you're talking there, Kethevane, watching the images which were recorded just half an hour ago of those leaders coming in, sitting down there, Emmanuel Macron with Donald Trump on one side, Volodymyr Zelensky on the other, and very much trying to create a convivial atmosphere, I suppose, between them. And is there any indication that they're actually going to succeed? Are they going to be able to convince him?
Well, look, there are a few positive signs in the sense that Donald Trump had those calls on Sunday with Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin separately, obviously. He said these were good conversations, but he also said maybe we can do something about that war. And also yesterday added, now that this is finished, talking about the Iran war, he said, we're going to focus on that, meaning the Ukraine war. So there's a little bit of positive in the sense that maybe this is a sign that the U.S. isn't fully disengaged from what is happening in Ukraine, that, yes, now that at least partly the situation with Iran is a little bit under control for now. Maybe Donald Trump has the bandwidth to care or focus a little bit on Ukraine. But the question really is, will the Ukrainians and the Europeans manage to get the United States, especially the U.S. president, sort of a little bit closer to the Ukrainian side? Will they be able to make Donald Trump understand that previous proposals, for example, what happened in Alaska, was too favorable to Moscow, and that he needs to understand that the way to end this war is not to be favorable to Moscow, but to put pressure on Moscow. Again, it's going to be hard because of what I was saying about the fact that Donald Trump has been more inclined to side with the Russians than with the Ukrainians. The other issue really for Volodymyr Zelensky, who said a priority was to get more military support from all these G7 leaders, is the support of Ukraine from the United States. It's completely at a standstill, basically, since Donald Trump came in to office. Same thing sort of for the sanctions, even though he has even lifted or temporarily lifted some of those sanctions. There are forces in the United States who want to help Ukraine. There is a plan ready to go in the Senate with more support for Ukraine, more sanctions on Russia. A bill was passed in the House separately just recently doing the same thing. But so far, Republican leadership in both the Senate and the House in the U.S. Don't want to push forward with those plans because they want the green light from Donald Trump. The question is, can the Europeans and the Ukrainian president together manage to get Donald Trump to give that green light so that Congress in the United States can actually go ahead and do what clearly it has shown it wants to do?